Mayowa felt a chill run through her body, but she kept her composure. Is that truly how you want to use your position, Professor? To punish a student for refusing your inappropriate advances? You have no proof of anything inappropriate, he said with a cold smile. It would be your word against mine. A respected professor against a scholarship student from some village no one has heard of. Perhaps, Mayowa acknowledged, taking a step toward the door. But I will still know the truth. And so will you. As she closed the door behind her, Mayowa felt both stronger and more vulnerable than she ever had before. She had stood her ground, protected her dignity, but at what cost? The dream she had worked toward for so long now seemed to be slipping away like water between her fingers. As she closed the door behind her, Mayowa felt both stronger and more vulnerable than she ever had before. She had stood her ground, protected her dignity, but at what cost? The dream she had worked toward for so long now seemed to be slipping away like water between her fingers. As she closed the door behind her, Mayowa felt both stronger and more vulnerable than she ever had before. She had stood her ground, protected her dignity, but at what cost? The dream she had worked toward for so long now seemed to be slipping away like water between her fingers. Talking to yourself, a voice asked gently. Mayowa turned to see Dr. Banko, her favorite professor, entering the chapel. Just thinking aloud, Mayowa replied, quickly wiping away a tear. I've been teaching for 30 years, Dr. Banko said, studying Mayowa's face. I've learned to recognize when a student is carrying a heavy burden. Would you like to talk about it? For a moment, Mayowa considered sharing everything. But fear held her back. What if no one believed her? What if speaking out made things worse? It's just academic pressure, she said finally. Final year is more challenging than I expected. Well, Dr. Banko said, standing up. When you're ready to talk about the real issue, my office door is always open. Sometimes the heaviest burdens become lighter when shared. As the weeks passed, Mayowa threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. If Professor Adekoya was determined to fail her based on his personal grudge, she would at least ensure that her performance was flawless, leaving no legitimate reason for a failing grade. You're pushing yourself too hard, Joseph told her during one of their study sessions. You barely eat, you hardly sleep. This isn't healthy, Mayowa. I need to pass this course, she replied simply. Failure is not an option. The day of the final examination arrived. Mayowa had studied every possible topic, memorized every key fact, prepared for every potential question. She walked into the examination hall with as much confidence as she could muster. Professor Adekoya supervised the examination personally, his cold gaze following Mayowa as she took her seat. When he handed her the examination paper, his fingers lingered against hers for a moment too long. You had your chance, he whispered, too quietly for others to hear. Remember that. Despite her nervousness, Mayowa found the examination surprisingly straightforward. The questions covered exactly the topic she had studied so thoroughly, and her pen flew across the pages as she wrote detailed, accurate answers. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps her academic performance would be too strong for even Professor Adekoya to justify failing her. As she handed in her paper, Professor Adekoya's expression gave nothing away. Good luck, Miss Adewale, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll need it. The waiting period after examinations was always difficult, but this time it felt excruciating. Mayowa alternated between hope and despair, between confidence in her academic abilities and fear of Professor Adekoya's vindictiveness. Finally, the day arrived when results would be posted. Students gathered around the notice boards, some cheering in relief, others groaning in disappointment. Mayowa pushed her way through the crowd, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure others could hear it. Finally, The day arrived when results would be posted. Students gathered around the notice boards, some cheering in relief, others groaning in disappointment. Mayowa pushed her way through the crowd, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure others could hear it. There it was, in stark black and white, Adekoya, Mayowa, failed. Despite her flawless attendance, excellent performance on all assignments, and what she knew was a strong examination paper, Professor Adekoya had failed her. "That can't be right," Joseph said, looking over her shoulder. "You're the best student in our class. How could you fail?" "There must be a mistake," another classmate agreed. "You should request a review of your paper." But Mayowa knew it was no mistake. This was Professor Adekoya's revenge, his way of showing her the consequences of rejecting him. The weight of what this meant crashed down on her. She would not graduate with her class. She would need to repeat the course, adding another year to her studies. Another year of expenses her family and community could ill afford. Following her friend's advice, Mayowa requested a review of her examination paper. She waited outside the department office for hours until Professor Adekoya emerged. "Professor Adekoya," she called, rising to her feet. "I'd like to request a review of my examination paper. I believe there may have been an error in the grading." He turned slowly, his expression one of faint amusement. "Miss Adekoya, I was wondering when you would come to see me." "Yes, you may review your paper. My office, tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next day, Mayowa steeled herself for another confrontation and knocked on Professor Adekoya's door precisely at 2 p.m. "Oh, Miss Adekoya. Please, come in," he said, his tone pleasant but his eyes cold. He handed her the examination paper, marked with red ink. "Review it all you want. You'll find that your answers were inadequate." Mayowa's heart sank as she looked through the paper. Where she had written detailed, comprehensive answers, the professor had made arbitrary marks, deducting points for imprecise language or insufficient detail, criticisms that made no sense given the thoroughness of her responses. "This is unfair," she said quietly, looking up at him. "These deductions aren't valid. My answers are correct." "And yet," he replied, leaning back in his chair, "I am the professor, and I determine what is correct. If you disagree, you're welcome to file a formal complaint. Of course, that would require a hearing before the academic committee, where you would need to explain why you believe your answers are superior to my professional judgment." The implication was clear. A formal complaint would be his word against hers, and he held all the power. Mayowa felt trapped, the unfairness of it all threatening to overwhelm her. "Is there nothing I can do?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. His expression changed, becoming calculating. "Well," he said slowly, "I could reconsider your grade. There's still time before final results are submitted to the registry. But that would require special consideration." Mayowa stood up, her decision unchanged despite the consequences. "No, thank you, Professor. I'll take the failing grade." "You're a fool," he called after her as she reached for the door. "1 year of your life wasted, all for some outdated sense of morality. Was it worth it?" Without turning around, Mayowa replied, "Yes. Because I can still look at myself in the mirror. Good day, Professor." The hardest part was yet to come, telling her grandmother and the church community that had invested so much in her education that she would need another year, another round of tuition fees, another year of sacrifice before she could graduate. "I don't understand," her grandmother said, her voice cracking with emotion over the phone. "You've never failed a course before." "It's complicated, Grandma," Mayowa replied, unable to bring herself to share the full truth. Sometimes things don't work out the way we plan." "We will find a way," Mama Folishade said finally, her voice firming with resolve. God has brought you this far. He will not abandon you now. Calling Pastor Adeyemi was equally difficult. The church had already stretched its resources to support her education, and asking for another year's worth of assistance felt like too much. Pastor, she began, her voice trembling. I have some difficult news. To her surprise, Pastor Adeyemi's response was immediate and supportive. Mayowa, my child, do not lose heart. The path to great achievement is rarely straight or easy. The church will continue to support you. But it's too much to ask, Mayowa protested, overwhelmed by their generosity. You've already done so much. It is never too much to invest in someone of your character, the pastor replied firmly. Besides, what is the church if not a family that supports each other through difficulties? That night, Mayowa sat on the steps outside her dormitory, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily on her shoulders, but beneath the hurt and disappointment, there was a quiet certainty that she had made the right choice. The days that followed were difficult. While her classmates excitedly discussed graduation plans and job prospects, Mayowa had to face the reality of remaining behind for another year, repeating a course she had already mastered. Mind if I join you? Joseph asked, setting his tray down across from her without waiting for an answer. You've been avoiding everyone since the results came out. I'm fine, Mayowa said automatically, pushing her food around her plate without eating. Just adjusting to the situation. Joseph leaned forward, lowering his voice. No one believes you failed that course fairly, Mayowa. We've all seen your work. Something's not right here. Mayowa looked up, surprised by his directness. What are you saying? I'm saying, Joseph continued, that Adekoya has a reputation. You're not the first female student he's failed mysteriously, and probably not the last. Unless someone speaks up. Fear gripped Mayowa's heart. Speak up. Who would believe me over a respected professor? Maybe more people than you think, came a voice from behind her. Mayowa turned to see Amora, a quiet girl from their class whom she barely knew. What do you mean? Mayowa asked as Amora sat down beside her. He did the same to me last year, Amora said quietly, her eyes downcast. I was too afraid to say anything. I just repeated the course with another professor. A cold realization washed over Mayowa. He's done this before? Multiple times. It's like an open secret among female students, Amora continued. Most just give in because they can't afford to delay their graduation. Others, like me, stay quiet and retake the course. Nobody wants to risk their future by challenging someone with his connections. This is wrong, Joseph said, his fist clenching on the table. He can't be allowed to keep doing this. What can we do? Mayowa asked, her mind racing with possibilities. It would be my word against his. Not if we stand together, came another voice. Mayowa looked up to see Funmi, another classmate, who had apparently overheard their conversation. He pulled the same thing with my roommate last year, Funmi explained. She was too scared to report him, but she told me everything. By the end of lunch, 5 students had gathered at Mayowa's table, each with a story about Professor Adekoya's inappropriate behavior or unfair grading practices. A pattern was emerging, one that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding. We should go to the dean, Joseph suggested. Together. He can't ignore multiple complaints. The dean and Adekoya play golf together, Funmi pointed out. We need to go higher, to the University Ethics Committee. Don't know, Amora said hesitantly. What if they don't believe us? What if it makes things worse? Mayowa had been quiet, listening to the others. Now she looked up, a new resolve in her eyes. Whether they believe us or not, we have to try. Not just for ourselves, but for every student who comes after us. If we stay silent, nothing changes. I'll go with you, Joseph said immediately. As a witness. He hasn't targeted me personally, but I've observed his behavior toward female students. One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Even Amora, though visibly afraid, whispered, "I'll speak up too. It's time." That afternoon, Mayowa found herself facing Dr. Bango, who served on the university ethics committee. She had remembered the professor's earlier offer of support and decided to start there rather than filing a formal complaint immediately. "I should have come to you sooner," Mayowa admitted after explaining the situation. "I was afraid." Dr. Bango's expression was grave. "Fear is Professor Adekoya's weapon, Mayowa. He counts on it keeping his victim silent." "You believe me?" Mayowa asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Unfortunately, yours is not the first such story I've heard," Dr. Bango said, her voice heavy with regret. "But it has always been one student at a time, easily dismissed or pressured into silence. This time, with multiple students coming forward together." She leaned forward, her expression determined. "This time, we have a chance to stop him." The following days passed in a blur of interviews, statements, and meetings. The ethics committee, faced with testimonies from multiple students, had no choice but to launch a formal investigation into Professor Adekoya's conduct. Word spread quickly through campus. To Mayowa's surprise, more students came forward with similar experiences, not just from the current year but from previous years as well. What had begun as 6 students standing together grew to 12, then 20. "I never thought this would happen," Amora said to Mayowa as they left yet another meeting with the ethics committee. "I thought I was alone, that no one would care." "That's how people like Professor Adekoya maintain their power," Mayowa replied. "They isolate their victims, make them feel alone and helpless. But we are not alone, and we are not helpless. Not anymore." Meanwhile, when Mayowa's church learned the full story, they rallied around her with even greater support than before. Pastor Adeyemi organized a special prayer service, not just for Mayowa but for all the students who had found the courage to speak up. True courage, Pastor Adeyemi told the congregation, is not the absence of fear, but doing what is right despite that fear. Our Mayowa has shown such courage, and we stand with her. Letters and messages of support began arriving from imagined.When as well. The village elders sent a formal letter commending her integrity. Former teachers wrote expressing their pride in her strength. And from her grandmother came a package containing her father's old watch. "Your father wore this when he stood up against the corrupt officials who wanted to take our land," Mama Foleshade had written. He, too, chose dignity over an easier path. Wear it and remember that courage runs in your blood. The investigation proceeded methodically, with the ethics committee interviewing students, reviewing grade records, and examining Professor Adekoya's past conduct. Despite his protestations of innocence and attempts to discredit the students' testimonies, the evidence against him mounted. Professor Adekoya, seeing the walls closing in, attempted to leverage his connections to halt the investigation. He called in favors from influential friends, made threats about lawsuits against the university, and tried to intimidate witnesses into retracting their statements. But the movement Mayowa had helped start had gained too much momentum to be stopped. Students across different departments and years had begun speaking out about other instances of harassment or abuse of power they had witnessed or experienced. "You've started something important," Dr. Bango told Mayowa during one of their meetings. "Something that goes beyond Professor Adekoya. You've helped create a space where people feel safe speaking truth to power." 3 weeks into the investigation, Professor Adekoya was suspended pending the final outcome. His courses were reassigned to other faculty members, and students who had received failing grades under suspicious circumstances were given the opportunity to have their work reevaluated. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dear Miss Adekoya, it began. Following a comprehensive review of your academic performance and the circumstances surrounding your evaluation in advanced pathology, the University Ethics Committee has determined that the failing grade previously assigned was not justified by your academic work. This grade has been overturned, and you have been awarded a passing mark commensurate with your demonstrated knowledge and skills. You are eligible to graduate with your class. Mayowa read the letter 3 times, hardly daring to believe what it said. Not only had justice been served, but she would graduate on time, continue to medical school as planned, and fulfill her dream of becoming a doctor without further delay. Thank you, she whispered, though there was no one in the room to hear. Thank you for giving me the strength to stand firm. The news spread quickly. Joseph was the first to arrive at her dormitory, his face split with a wide grin. I just heard. You did it, Mayowa. You actually did it. We did it, Mayowa corrected him. All of us, together. The investigation's final report was released later that week. Professor Adekoya was permanently dismissed from the university, his academic credentials and reputation in tatters. The report documented a pattern of misconduct spanning years, affecting dozens of students who had been too afraid to speak up individually. This outcome sends a clear message, the university chancellor stated in a press release. Our institution is committed to maintaining the highest ethical standards and will not tolerate any abuse of power or position. Every student has the right to be evaluated fairly, based solely on their academic performance. For Mayowa, the most meaningful part of the report was not the punishment of Professor Adekoya, but the institutional changes it prompted. The university established new policies and reporting procedures specifically designed to protect students from harassment and ensure fair grading practices. Your courage has created lasting change, Dr. Banko told Mayowa when they met to discuss the report. Future students will be protected because you refused to remain silent. As graduation approached, Mayowa found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a village girl with big dreams to a soon-to-be university graduate who had helped change an institution, each step had shaped her into someone stronger than she had imagined she could be. On the day before graduation, Mayowa's grandmother arrived in the city, making the long journey from imagined.When for the first time in her life. Mama Foleshade looked small and somewhat out of place in the bustling university town, but her eyes shone with pride as she embraced her granddaughter. Look at you, Mama Foleshade said, holding Mayowa at arm's length to take in the sight of her. My little girl, all grown up and changing the world. I'm not changing the world, Grandma, Mayowa said with a smile. Just trying to make one small corner of it better. That's how the world changes, her grandmother replied wisely. One small corner at a time, by people brave enough to stand for what is right. The graduation ceremony was held in the university's grand hall, filled with proud families and excited graduates. When Mayowa's name was called to receive her degree, something unexpected happened. Instead of the usual polite applause, a thunderous ovation erupted from the gathered students.